Thank you, everybody, again for coming. This looks like a great crowd, and we have an incredible panel here tonight. And there's the first slide. Sorry, everything okay? All right, good. So I'm going to give you guys a very quick presentation, just sort of setting the stage for this panel before I introduce them. The first slide is what panelist Nico Sell described to me as the summer of Snowden. We've all been living through this fascinating world over the past few months, where some of our most paranoid and arguably delusional suspicions about government spying have turned out to be not so paranoid and delusional. Are there any government people in the audience? NSA? No NSA? Okay, good. No, I'm just curious because, you know, the smart government agent would be here hoping to figure out how to make some money once he retires from the government. Anyway, so one of the key questions that's really struck me in the past few months as I've done some reporting on this is that while it's true that every law has its limits, even the First and Second Amendments, it appears that the Fourth Amendment seems to stop, or at least come under some severe questioning when it's involving digital communication. I'm wondering if privacy is moving from being a right to a privilege, which brings us to our second slide. Mr. Zuckerberg. As we know, if you've been reading the news, last week Mark bought 4 houses that surround his own estate. And at least in part, his reasoning was to give himself more privacy. So even Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, wants more privacy. That I think says a lot about the world that we're living in. It says 2 things to me right off the bat. One is, again, is privacy a right or a privilege? Is it something that only people who have, gazillion dollars can afford? Or is it something that should be afforded to everybody in our society? And it's sort of mind-boggling to even be asking these questions. These are things that I think a lot of us had thought were settled, not just in terms of law, but in terms of societal mores, how we interact with each other. This is no longer the case. Which brings us to one of the most fascinating things about Zuckerberg. Whether you think he's a hero or a villain, he's really proven that the best way to not go about building privacy into a startup or an app is to not do it piecemeal and slowly chip away at things that your users thought they had. Certainly, it hasn't affected his bottom line or even the Facebook user base. But what it has affected is people's trust in him. And judging from a few of the hissings that I heard from the audience, privacy seems like something that people want baked into their apps and their startups from the get-go. And he certainly would have a better reputation if he thought of these before. Which leads us to the rest of us. We're not all wearing masks, but when we're online, in a lot of ways we are. And strangely, none of us have really had any tool belts. There haven't been a lot of tools afforded to us beforehand. And I think that, whether we see privacy as an heroic endeavor or something that only villains use to plan terrorist bombings, it's something that we have to start considering, especially in new businesses that start up. And what shape those tools take and what goes into a particular individual's tool belt, I think can be different things depending on the person. What a child needs to use online tools safely in terms of privacy are probably very different from somebody who is an experienced vigilante. And so that brings me to our panel. We have an incredible panel here tonight. First up, we have Casey Oppenheim. He's the co-CEO and co-founder of Disconnect, which is an online privacy startup. And its mission is to help people understand and control the personal information that they share online. This is all in your pamphlets, which were on your chairs. But it's important to realize that people who come to the privacy world come to it sometimes out of personal needs, and sometimes they come to it from a personal interest. And Casey, before he founded Disconnect, was a consumer rights attorney. So that's something to consider. Nico, very similarly, Nico is in the middle. And she's the only one who was smart enough to wear glasses because those video lights are really bright. But Nico also comes to it from a personal interest. She's a professional artist, an athlete, and an entrepreneur. She's also a mother, and she's the CEO and co-founder of Wicker, which is a free messaging app that emphasizes secure transactions between SMS contacts. She's also founded Roots, which is a nonprofit dedicated to teaching kids how to enjoy being hackers and using their hacking powers for good. That gets back to our cast of characters on the slide. And she's currently on numerous advisory boards, including All Clear ID, Artemis, Blacko, CrowdStrike, Lookout, and NCC, plus several stealth organizations. I don't see her wearing a mask, but we'll trust her on that. In between Casey and Nico is Phil Zimmerman. Many of you probably know who he is. He created PGP. He is the co-founder of Silent Circle. He recently closed down Silent Circle's encrypted email because of reasons that we will get into later tonight. But he has been at the forefront of online and protected communications for 20 years, I think. Is that about right, Phil? More than that. More than that, okay. Next up, we've got Jack Yang. Jack is next to Nico. He's the Associate General Counsel of Visa's Global Privacy Office. And you're probably thinking, what is he doing up here? In fact, Jack is going to offer some really interesting insight. I've been talking to him over the past week. And as part of Visa's legal counsel, he advises Visa on privacy. And if I asked any of us who don't have a Visa card to raise our hands, I think there would be maybe 5 people here. We're all touched by Visa and its data centers and their financial transactions. And so people like Jack who can influence that kind of privacy policy, I think, are very important parts of the conversation. And last up is Jacques Binkowski. Jacques comes from the investment side. He is a member of US Venture Partners. He joined in 2005, so he's been there quite a while. And he spends a lot of time working with the Israeli market. And I'm spending way too much time on these intros. I thought it was going to be 5 minutes, but these are fascinating people. So I'm going to get out of their way. And I believe first up is Casey and his presentation.
Right behind you. All right, so my name is Casey Oppenheim. I am the co-founder of Disconnect. We're an online privacy company based right here in Palo Alto, down the road, Page Mill Road. We've been around for just under 3 years, and I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you a little bit about why and how I started Disconnect. I think that essentially why I started Disconnect is because I had a passion for privacy, public interest causes, and consumer rights causes. Also, because the timing was really good. I think that it's easy to look back standing here today after Edward Snowden with a room full of people who are all very interested in online privacy and say, okay, I had this vision 2.5, 3 years ago. I'm not sure I would go that far, but I definitely saw a wave was coming where people were going to be much more interested in privacy. So I want to talk to you about a few of the major trends that I saw happening over even the course of the last 15 years that made me think that privacy was going to be something that's really big. These slides, by the way, are not awesome, but hopefully I can lead you through them in a way that makes sense. So back in the mid-1990s, I was an investigator working with the Public Defender's Office in Manhattan. And at that time, if you wanted to find out information on a witness or a person of interest, whoever it was actually a ridiculous amount of work. It wasn't as bad as using a magnifying glass up against the globe, but it was pretty bad. It involved the white pages or going to a dusty county courthouse basement and paying $5 per document to copy some, trivial piece of public records information. What happened is that companies started bringing all of that information online. Companies like Intellius, whose first customer was the government, and then employers, health insurance companies, stuff like that. So what they were doing is creating these massive people finder databases where they could tell you where you lived. They could tell you how much you paid for your house. They could tell you who your family members were. Anything that they could gather from public records sources. And so a lot of that information started going online, and that was really good in some ways. As an investigator, certainly, it was a lot easier to find information out about people. But people really didn't like that. And for the first time that I know of, people started paying for a privacy tool. And that was the privacy tools that opt you out of these types of databases. The second kind of megatrend that you guys are probably well aware of is the rise of tracking cookies. So this was obviously a huge industry that boomed in the early 2000s and then through today, obviously. Companies like DoubleClick started using tracking technologies where they would invisibly track you as you went around the web, and then they would correlate all the information that they could gather, put it into a profile based on your IP address, typically, and so that advertisers could better target their ads. It's also important, I think, to note, there's a lot of people who are into privacy rights right now, but even when DoubleClick was starting, we're talking 15 years ago, there was a huge backlash against this technology. They were sued by groups like the ACLU and other privacy rights groups. So people were really saying, hey, people who knew what was going on were saying, we really don't like this technology. Because it's surreptitiously tracking you behind your back, and your browsing history and your online behavior is actually pretty personal information. So 2007, Google becomes the cookie monster. They eat DoubleClick. They bought them for $3 billion in 2007, and suddenly Google established themselves as by far the biggest advertiser, I guess, or ad tracker at least in the world. Their display ad business is massive. Google makes about 90% of their revenue on advertising. So at the same time that this was happening, my co-founder, Brian Kenish, he was actually at DoubleClick. He wrote their original mobile ad servers. Then he came over to Google before the acquisition, and he worked on Google's ad APIs. And so he was very well aware of the type of tracking technology that was coming down the pike. 2010, the like buttons started popping up everywhere. It's not that long ago, right? In 3 years, basically the Facebook widget has taken over the internet. I think that we did a research for the Wall Street Journal, and this was like 2 years ago, and it was already on 40% of the top 1,000 websites. I would say now, that's probably doubled. I'm not sure exactly what the number is. But these Facebook like buttons, what many people didn't realize back when they first came out, is that Facebook could collect huge swaths of their users' browsing history, because when you would go to a page where a like button or another Facebook widget, Facebook Connect showed up, basically they would get pinged that you had been on that page. And so in this way, they were able to track huge swaths of your browsing history in addition to everything else that was happening that they were tracking when you were on Facebook.com. So my co-founder, he was at Google at the time. He decided that he didn't like these Facebook widgets. He was going to try to block them. He wrote 50 lines of JavaScript code, and he put it into a browser extension, and he spammed his email contact list, which was, I think, 400 or 500 people. And he thought, maybe I'll get 50 people using this thing. And within a few weeks, there was 50,000 people using it. He and I started talking more about the possibility of starting a company. And a few months later, we actually launched the Disconnect company. So this is, over here is one of our original websites. I do not recommend a lawyer and an engineer putting together a website for your company. But we did launch at the launch conference in San Francisco in 2011, and it was a very horrible experience. No, we actually won Best Technology in the category that we were in, which was awesome. But we were, just after we did our presentation, one of the esteemed judges, Dave McClure, who's a pretty famous investor, he was part of the original PayPal Mafia, and is very involved with 500 startups. He had some pretty choice words for us afterwards. I think it was something along the lines of, I don't give, well, I shouldn't, I won't, I don't know if any of you know Dave McClure. Yeah, I'll keep that cool. But he basically, nobody cares about privacy. Privacy is such a niche, small minority market, maybe 1 to 5%. Those are the people who care about privacy. Out of those people who care about privacy, it's an extremely small percentage who will even do anything about it. So, we walked away from that conference not feeling awesome about that perspective. And unfortunately, raising our first seed round was extremely difficult. It was not easy and it was not fun because most of the investors that we talked to responded in one of two ways. One, do people really care about privacy? Or two, people don't care about privacy. And so it was not an easy process. I think a lot of the way that we were actually able to eventually raise money is we realized that we had to really spell out the opportunity. And this is an actual page. I think it was like the first page of our deck for the seed round eventually. And that has more words on it, by the way, than our entire deck for our A round had. So the next round of funding, we really didn't have to paint the picture the way we did for that first round. But people weren't seeing it. People weren't seeing why privacy was going to be such a big deal, at least most of the investors that we spoke with. So, Summer of Snowden. Government tracking has been going on for a long time, right? I mean, the Patriot Act, there was huge battles over what was going on with the warrantless wiretapping and all the rest, and that was a decade ago. But this is different. I think that this is not just a sea change for privacy, but this is a historically really important event. And I think that, if you look at studies about what people care about in terms of tracking, most of the studies that I read say that government tracking is not what they really care about, but they hate companies tracking them. They hate companies having massive amounts of their personal information. And I think what we have now is the realization that all of this personal information that we have on these popular, tech companies, your email, your phone, all of your communications, all of your browsing history, all of the search history that you have, all of your photos, it's so much information, and the government basically has access to it. And there's not much that most companies can do to stand in the way of it. They have national security letters that you can't tell people about. They have FISA court orders that you can't, that you may never be able to tell people about. They have other means of getting your information that you cannot prevent. And so we're living in a world for the first time, I think, where these billion-dollar companies that are making, their business models are so tied to tracking your every movement and serving you ads based on the information they get, they're threatened. I think that eventually, the way that I see this playing out is that people aren't going to leave Facebook in droves, but they're not going to share the same amount of information. They're not going to engage in the same personal level of detail, and maybe they're going to think before they share that, whatever it is. And the same thing with search. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of how we view our place in the privacy space. We're not trying to change your behavior. We're not trying to create a new Google. What we're trying to do is create a layer of privacy on top of the web as you know it. So instead of creating a new search engine, we've created Disconnect Search, which allows you to use your favorite search engine just as you normally would without being tracked by that company. And so that's kind of the way that we're thinking about privacy in general, is that we want you to have the private internet the way that you want it. So right now we have private browsing, we have private search, we have a mobile app. We're very interested in figuring out some private messaging product. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip through to the business model, which is, I save it for last for a reason. That's been the hardest question to answer when people ask you, what is your business model? We think that right now our business is pay what you want. We are asking you to contribute if you find value in our service. So far, our expectations have been surpassed in terms of the performance. It's actually fairly similar to a freemium business. We're getting about 3% of users to pay, which I think is similar on par with like Evernote, which is a really good freemium business. I think that if you look at what's going on in the crowdfunding space, you look at Kickstarter, you look at the micropayment platforms that are emerging. I don't know if you've ever heard of Flatter, but there's ways where you can very easily tip websites that you like. I think that this is a trend that is actually going to take off. Whether it's going to work for us as our primary business model or not, I'm not sure. But I look around the web and Google, one of the biggest companies in the world, they're making about $50 a user per year. I think Facebook, I don't know, you tell me, they got 1 billion users. I think they have about $5 billion in revenue or something. So they're making about $5 a user per year. I mean, what do you for Google, for me, I mean, $50, that's like, it's nothing. It's half what I pay to go to the YMCA per month or something. And I mean, it's not that much money. So I guess my point is that I think that there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to subscribe for the private internet, for not that much money. I don't want to get into too much of it. I also think that, personally, what I'm very interested in is online advertising. I think online advertising is ripe for disruption right now. So much of it relies on a lack of transparency and tracking users, and it's inefficient. It's inefficient in terms of the click-through rates. It's working for some people, but if you look at what Google's doing with talking about moving beyond browser cookies, Microsoft's talking about the same thing. Firefox has already announced that they're gonna do away with third-party cookies. And so the online advertising industry is changing. It's a $120 billion industry. So I think that in terms of figuring out a business model, figuring out a way for websites and publishers to make money without privacy invasive advertising, I'm very interested in that. Oops. Oh, I guess my last slide was just my email address, which is casey@disconnectme. Thanks a lot for listening.
All right. Thank you very much, Casey. Next up is Nico.
All right, so what I'd like to talk to you about today is a new concept, really, the idea of escaping the internet. I think it's something that we all need to do. And sorry, I think just give me a second. This technology thing is really tough. My background, like Seth said, I've been helping organize DEF CON, largest hacker gathering in the world for a long time. I hang out with the most paranoid people in the world, and also founded the kids part of that. So I spend a lot of time with the best hackers in the world and kids. And Wicker was really a culmination of putting those two together. And one of our keynotes a year and a half ago was General Alexander here. You might have read a lot about recently, but head of Cyber Command in the NSA. And when I think about my family and friends and what the biggest threat is to them, it's not this guy. Actually, I'm pretty sure the NSA is watching what I do. I don't really care. But this is what's the biggest threat to my family, is the fact that the internet is forever. And the permanence of the internet is something that's really tough, especially for kids to understand. Let me give you an example. That was my daughter you saw on the other page there. She's one of the most famous hackers in the world. She knows that I boycott social networks. Don't allow her to do it either, and yet she posted this picture of our dog Max here online. It's really cute. We like to show pictures of our dog. What she didn't realize was that, I went to her, I said, what are you doing? Why did you post this picture? I've told you we don't post pictures on social networks. And she says, Mom, I know, but it's just a picture of our dog. And I said, well, where did you take that picture and with which device? Because I've been working for the last 20 years successfully to keep all of our physical addresses off the internet, and in one picture, you ruined it. And this is from one of the most famous hackers in the world, so you can imagine all the problems that your kids are doing, the geotags that they're living all over there, that anyone can follow them on. So as I said, I boycott Facebook. I think it's something that all of you should do. It's becoming a little bit more in vogue. And the idea is take control of your digital soul. Right now, they own it. Look at their terms of service. Look at their privacy policy. Actually, if you look at Skype's privacy policy, this is what I think is a major, big difference, competitive differentiator between us and them. Read it. They own your communications. It's not just the NSA that's looking at what they do. They sell it to a lot of people. That's their business. So personally, I think you're stupid if you Skype. I don't think you should do it. And I was saying this even before the summer of Snowden, right? And the idea is that you don't trust anyone. We now know that. And something else, the FBI, as Seth mentioned, has asked me for a backdoor. And I said no and gave them a lecture on the Constitution. But if I maybe would have been asked that question 20 years ago, I would have had a different answer, because I would have said, yeah, I want to help the law enforcement. I want to track down bad guys. But the problem is that what you've realized is that a backdoor for the good guys 100% always equals a backdoor for the bad guys. Our hackers have shown how you break into the lawful intercept machine. So it's not just the law enforcement that has this information. So the idea here is that you need to build zero-knowledge systems. This is what all of us need to do going forward. When I look at Wicker around the world, we're in 181 countries now. The red is Wicker. What's interesting to me is the yellow countries. These are countries where encryption is illegal. But the thing is that encryption is not a crime. In fact, it's a human right. And it's a couple of human rights. If you look at Article 12 and Article 19 closely, private correspondence is something that's really important to a free society. And we're a small team, but I've got full-time general counsel and 6 law firms. And question that I ask my lawyers often, I said, is the United States the best country to run Wicker from today? Is this the best country to put our servers? And the answer is yes. If you're running a zero-knowledge system, this is absolutely the best country in the world to run a communication system like Wicker. And the reason why is because we have the First Amendment, and we have the Fourth Amendment, and we have a functioning court system here. So as long as you don't have anything to give over, there's no reason. You can access our servers, root them. I don't care, there's nothing in them. We can give access to the FBI. It'd be a waste of their time. And when I look about the history of the United States, my ancestor was a drummer boy for George Washington. And one of the great things that George Washington did when he founded this country was he established the US Post Office. And the big difference between the US Post Office and the British Post Office was 2 things. Private correspondence for the entire populace without government's prying eyes, and freedom of information without government censorship. These 2 fundamental points are something that all free society needs, not just in America, but everywhere throughout the world. It's something that we all deserve. Power to the people, that's what we're trying to bring. So allowing all of you to escape the internet here to a better place. And that's where we're going with Wicker. So I don't know why you haven't joined yet. It takes just a minute to download, and it's free, and we don't require any personal information. So Wicker me at NIC0.
I think that this convergence of a kind of a crisis of confidence in the internet between the Snowden revelations and what we already knew about the concentration of customer data that large companies like Google and Facebook monetize. When you put those 2 things together, and we learned that these companies are cooperating with the government, it forces us to re-examine the question of should we create business models where we monetize customer data? I think the answer should be no, as much as we can avoid it. The traditional way of doing business is to charge money for a product or a service. Well, I think we should try to get back to that, back to our roots. If you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. So let's not make business models where our population of users that believe themselves to be our customers are not really our customers, but the products that we sell to advertisers who are our real customers. Let's not do that. Let's push back. I think that the Snowden revelations should be an inspiration for us to push back against that, because when we collect customer data to monetize customer data, it becomes an attractive nuisance, and it attracts governments who come and ask for it. And we really can't refuse them because they have the power of law behind them. But what if you had a business model where you just have people pay you for the services rendered, and you don't need to collect any customer data for any other, you collect just the minimum to process their credit card. You don't even need to keep that yourself. You can have a credit card processor do it for you. We have, in our customers at Silent Circle, we don't even know their names. You just sign up and we take your money. That's all we want is your money. Just give us your money and nobody gets hurt. And for that, you get our loyalty. And we don't keep any logs, which is, by the way, a very hard thing to do. It takes work to do that because, you know, we do voice over IP, secure VoIP products and secure text messaging. And when something goes wrong, I call the engineers and I say, oh, it just did this wrong thing. Can you fix it? And they say, well, that's really hard because we don't keep logs. So they tear their hair out trying to, chase down the bugs without the benefit of having logs on the server. We know that it's dangerous to keep logs on the server. We're forced to perform unnatural acts of engineering to avoid doing logs on the server. And we now have discovered from the Snowden revelations that we have to do that. Because if we don't, we're going to get hit with national security letters, like LavaBits was. We have to push back. We have to change the laws. We have to do this with technology, which is one thing that we're doing. But we have to do more than just the technology. We have to push back in policy space. We have to change the laws. I had the occasion to, back about 10 years ago, I happened to be at a briefing from somebody from the Justice Department, a guy named Viet Din, who was one of the authors of the Patriot Act. And he said that he was explaining the Patriot Act to us, and I raised my hand and said, why is the Justice Department teaching seminars to their prosecutors on how to use the Patriot Act to prosecute all manner of crime? And he said, well, crime is crime, and prosecutors should have all the tools at their disposal. And I said, but wait a minute, the Patriot Act was supposed to be a social contract to protect us from Al-Qaeda. We allowed the Patriot Act to pass because we needed to be protected from Al-Qaeda. And he said, no, you have it wrong. This is the author of the Patriot Act telling me this. No, you have it wrong. The Patriot Act is something we've had for a long time, that we were waiting for the political opportunity. And 9/11 gave us that political opportunity, and we seized it. Well, I mean, a lot of us always thought that was the case, but here was the straight from the horse's mouth. He said this to my face. He also said it later to journalists. So, if we want to try to protect the democratic institutions that we work for so hard to nurture, we can't let the Patriot Act stand the way it is. We have to change it. We have to get the public to care about it, to get up on their hind legs and push back. And we have to make business models that don't serve as an attractive nuisance for the government to come after our monetized customer data. Stop doing that. And if you're a startup, distinguish yourself by just selling products and services for money and monetize the money they give you. Anyway, I guess I'd like to say something about Silent Circle. I don't really have a presentation for it, but I'm having more fun now than I ever had in my career. We fought the crypto wars of the 90s and got rid of the export controls, and now crypto has become a respectable thing. The legislative environment has completely changed from the 90s. Before, in the 90s, you had to explain yourself if you were using crypto. Now you have to explain yourself if you're not. If you're a doctor and you don't encrypt your patient records, then what's wrong with you? You may be violating the HIPAA laws. If you leave your laptop in a taxi with 200,000 customer records, then you better hope you're using whole disk encryption, or else you're going to have to go public with that loss of customer data. The legislative environment has become friendly to crypto, but the crypto battles that we fought in the 90s, we just had kind of simple goals. We just wanted to get rid of the export controls, and we wanted to push back on domestic controls and key escrow, like the Clipper chip. We won in the crypto wars of the 90s. And I was part of that with PGP. But the winning was not the whole battle. What we've learned recently is that post 9/11, the NSA expanded its capabilities beyond our imaginations. It's something that I've written about for 20 years, that it was possible to do this or that. But the capabilities of the NSA now that we've seen are breathtaking in their scope. And they're putting our democratic institutions in a dangerous position. We have no idea who will be in the White House in 2017, even if we attribute good motives to the last two administrations who assembled this infrastructure. We don't know who might rise to power in the future and how they would abuse a system like this. And we're undermining the public trust in internet companies by having them turn their, to cooperate with the NSA. So at Silent Circle, we take a very uncompromising position about this. My business partner is a former Navy SEAL, and we decided from the get-go that we would try to include government customers in our customer base so that we would create conditions for collateral damage if they ever asked us to put back doors in. If Navy SEALs are depending on it, then maybe a back door isn't such a good idea. A number of intelligence agencies use it. British SAS use it. Canadian Special Operations Forces. That's the government side. Enterprise, we have banks and oil companies and Fortune 100 companies. So we're trying to make it crypto respectable. And we don't have to explain ourselves for using strong crypto. One of the things that came out in the Snowden documents is the idea that the NSA is attracted to encrypted traffic, that they single it out for further scrutiny. Well, I think that should teach us that we need to treat that with a sort of an I am Spartacus reaction. We need to stand up and say, I am Spartacus, and encrypt our traffic. Use crypto as much as you can. So, how much am I out of time?
1 or 2 minutes tops.
Pardon me?
1 or 2 more minutes.
Okay. Is there a Q&A at the end?
Yes, we're going to do questions.
Okay.
And then,
I should know that,
And then
right?
audience questions.
So I guess I'm going to devote my efforts to growing this new startup, but I have to spend some of that time trying to return to the crypto wars of the 90s and fight back in policy space. Well, thanks for your time.
All right, so the first question that I have for the panelists is something that all three of our presenters sort of touched upon, but we didn't really get into quite in depth. And I think from a business point of view, from how do you build a business, it's actually a very important question, which is what is the balance between privacy and that can include encryption, and convenience and cost. Where do you draw that line? As I mentioned to in the intro, Phil's company just ended its secure email for reasons that he's been very public about, one of which is that it wasn't worth, the encryption that it was based on wasn't worth it. And if we could start, let's start with Casey.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is the trade-off, right? I mean, going back a long ways, people have been saying you have to sacrifice convenience in order to get good privacy, whether it's been encryption or a lot of different things. So we just launched our private search product last week, and I would say that was probably ready to go back in maybe beginning of May, mid-April. And we decided we wanted to make it do some different security things where we would not just, we wouldn't just proxy the tab that you're on, that you're searching in, but we would actually, oh, well, what if somebody opens a link in a new tab, and we wanted to, expand the protection to cover other links, or other tabs, excuse me. And so we went down that rat hole for probably about, 4 months, and
Not easy.
Untold thousands of dollars, and then we realized, okay, that's we're not going to get there right now, and so there's a huge trade-off all the time between the privacy, too much privacy and convenience.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Phil, can you talk a little bit more about how about what it's like to shut down a product? Secure email sounds like something that everybody wants.
Well, we had a secure email service, but it was handicapped by the fact that we did not have a PGP client that ran on a smartphone. And if we had, it would have been easier. But we just didn't have a PGP client. And it wasn't just the absence of a PGP client. We would have to write a PGP client, and then we'd also have to write a mail client, because you can't, on the iPhone, for example, there's the mail.app client that Apple totally controls, and you can't make a plugin for it. So we'd have to duplicate the mail.app client too, which, I don't know how many people Apple hired to work on that, but we'd have to expend a huge amount of engineering resources. So we had to do something else. We put the encryption on the server by just purchasing a license for PGP Universal, which is a server-side implementation of PGP that's designed for enterprise use. Well, enterprise customers have an IT department, and all their users are employees of the company. So it's a monolithic kind of approach. All the keys are owned by the employees, which are really owned by the company. So it kind of works okay to have a server-side PGP for an IT department for a monolithic company. It doesn't work so well for a heterogeneous population of users that don't work for the same company, because they're all subject to, somebody could come in and demand their keys, and we'd have to hand them over, which would be really bad. It would be bad for our customers and bad for our reputation. So when LavaBit was kind of a canary in the coal mine. We'd been discussing for some weeks, or actually a couple of months, about shutting down our email service, because we recognized the vulnerability that it had. But then when LavaBit pulled the plug on its email service, and we understood why, we understood exactly why, and we thought we'd be next. So on the same day that we got the news about LavaBit, we moved very, very fast, and we wiped out our email service without warning, without telling our users, all we did was we totally overwrote the disk containing all of our email from our customers, and then told everyone after the fact. Because we knew that if we gave any warning at all, there would be a national security letter coming in the next morning. And we didn't want that. So it was, we got some customers that complained about it, but I think most of our customers recognized that we had to do this. Now, the reason why is because we had keys on the server, and even if we didn't have keys on the server, we'd only be encrypting the content of the messages, all that metadata, who it's from, who it's to, the timestamp, the subject matter, the IP address of where it came from, all that would be exposed. And we don't have that kind of exposure in our flagship products for VoIP and instant messaging. So, metadata is now recognized to be extremely valuable. So we didn't want to expose our customers to that.
I want to get the panelists to discuss what the value of metadata is for a minute. I think it's a term that we hear a lot of, especially in light of all the Snowden leaks. But what is metadata? Why is it important? Why is this something that companies can turn into money? Companies like Google and Facebook and others. And how do you ensure people's privacy, even when you can see their email headers flying around, stuff like that? Nico, do you want to take a stab?
Well, I see metadata as a little bigger than what's described right now in terms of, I think it's data attached to data. Mm-hmm. And knowing who you're talking to, when, how often, for how long, can tell a lot about what you're doing.
It's very telling, yeah.
And so those are all things that need to be secret.
Mm-hmm.
I also think about metadata a little bit different, like I was talking about with my daughter with the photo, which is a little different. There's metadata attached to video, PDFs, and pictures, which is your geolocation, the identity of the device. So there's a lot of definitions for metadata, but I think in general you want to stay away from it.
I mean, some of it gets broadcasted no matter what. You open up a web browser, you go to a website, and if the person who designed the site is savvy, they know that you're coming from Firefox or Chrome, and also what version of it, and also what version of your plugins. And there are things that get broadcasted, like Yellow Pages. That stuff is not necessarily as necessary to protect. Jack, from Visa's point of view, how do you wind up protecting people's transactional data?
Well, actually, it's an excellent question. So basically, first you have to understand a little bit about the Visa system. Now, oftentimes people come to me and say, "Hey, Jack, you work for Visa. Can you do anything about my interest rate?" And the answer is no, I can't, because actually Visa at the end of the day is a transaction processing network, and what we do is we sit in the middle. We have the issuing bank is the one that actually issues the credit card to a consumer. Consumer takes that card, uses it at a merchant. That merchant actually has a relationship with another bank that we call in the industry an acquiring bank, one who actually provides services to the merchant. And ultimately what happens when the consumer swipes that card, the transaction information, which is very limited in scope, travels from the merchant to the acquirer through the Visa network, and through a process that is called authorization, goes back to the issuer. The issuer looks at that, makes a decision in a split second about whether or not to actually transmit, to authorize or reject that transaction, and sends it all the way back. That happens thousands of times a second, 365, 24/7, right? The key here, what you've actually already heard from a number of the other panelists is exactly, it's kind of funny. What we did out of necessity, they were really talking about data minimization at the end of the day. Try to actually transmit and store as little information as you possibly can. So in order to transmit a Visa transaction, there's actually very little information you need to transmit. You need a card number, time and date stamp, transaction amount, and a merchant ID, right? That's pretty much all the information you actually need to transact in that way. And I would like to say that it would be nice for me to say that Visa did that out of respect for privacy, but you also have to remember aspects of Visa were created back in the 1970s, right? So that's when bandwidth was really expensive and data had to stay really, really small, right? But that's a precept and that's a concept that we've carried forward throughout our entire history. So one is actually minimization. Two, it's about making, since the Visa system is in fact an ecosystem of merchants and issuers and otherwise, even our security standards, we have an industry security standard that is referred to as PCI DSS. That's the payment card industry standard, and it is referred to as DSS's data security standard. Data security standard basically tells you drop the data. If you're a merchant, don't hold on to the card number. If you do, you got to encrypt it, right? And there are different levels of compliance around that. Now, panelists and the other panelists would say, that's crazy. Why would you ever even allow somebody to encrypt the information and use it? At the end of the day, you're talking about that balance between convenience, consumer convenience, merchant convenience, and the need for security as well. If you don't allow somebody to keep information of some sort, simple things that you guys do today, like automatic bill pay, recurring payments for your gym, those things wouldn't be possible unless there was some form of information associated with that. And that's where the challenge lies. How do you actually continue to evolve the systems to be able to maintain the security and actually, ironically, also maintain the privacy? And those are the things that companies like Visa are looking for in the future as well.
And for Jacques, and then later for the rest of the panelists, how do you determine when somebody comes to you with a startup or a venture that they've been working on, how do you determine whether it's worth investing in? What makes it what differentiates somebody's secure email system from another person's secure email system? Assuming, that the security sounds legitimate, what would make you go towards one versus the other?
I think at the end of the day, we're looking for markets where there's revenue possible, because there's no revenue, there's no company. Mm-hmm. It's great to want to improve people's privacy and security, but if you're not a sustainable business, it's going to be a very short story. We like to go after businesses where there is a very clear incentive for somebody that has the capacity to pay to do something that may benefit them or may benefit a third party to get, in this case, privacy. So we were investors in a company called Trusteer, which was acquired by IBM about a month ago, which essentially protected on a transaction-by-transaction basis from the end device all the way to the bank. If you want to encrypt the keyboard and make sure that even if the device itself was already compromised, that the transaction with the bank was guaranteed to be private. And that was an amazingly successful company. I can't disclose more than that. You can read the newspaper. But basically what happened in that case is the banks had a tremendous incentive to protect that transaction because there was a huge amount of fraud otherwise happening. Yet the beneficiary and the user was the end user for whom it was free. And so trying to find that balance in those businesses that are trying to protect privacy or improve security between maintaining the convenience, increasing, if possible, the privacy, but making it a business because somebody else has a benefit for that to happen. I think that's sort of the triangle that we're looking for. And so we had a panel, for example, at a conference that we organized a few months ago, which was called Consumer as Users, Businesses as Payers. And that sort of goes against the idea that Phil mentioned, that people are selling customer data as a way to make money. Well, there's lots of cases where you're going to make money without breaching the privacy because you're providing a convenience, and you as a business, you're willing to do that. Mm-hmm. And those businesses are very sustainable and create an improved environment, if you want to think about it from a higher level point of view.
Nico, could you address this question too? Because you do some interesting things, I think, with Wicker in terms of technology that other companies don't do.
Well, I think that with Wicker, we just try to have the fun factor versus the fear factor. Mm-hmm. And I'm really competing against Snapchat. I don't think anyone downloaded Snapchat because it was good for them. It's because it was fun. And then you've got your main way to message with people, something that you do all the time. And so I think also too, in terms of, we're seeing new ways for people to make money, which is what I look at always is magazines. I think there's a couple different publishing models, as you know, Seth, right? Where you either make your money off the ads or you make your money off subscribers. And the kind of magazine that I want to be is the one that makes their money off their subscribers. So it's generally different kind of a content that you're working on there. So I don't really think of it as a trade-off as much as giving new features and benefits forward.
Casey?
I guess I'm not sure what question do you want me to answer. I'm interested in talking a little bit about why we went with pay what you want rather than just a subscription service, and my fear about the direction that that Phil brought up, and I guess Nico's mentioning as well. My concern here is that the internet turns into a class system, where in order to have privacy, you need to have money. And I look at the amount of people who are coming online in the next 5 to 10 years, and I worry that the internet is going to turn into cable television as compared to free television, where nowadays like you basically need cable television. I don't care about television because I don't think that's an essential thing that you need in order to get a job and have a career, but I think the internet is. And so that's my big concern, and why I like pay what you want model, where it's basically the same way that advertising works, right? Not everybody's going to click on an ad, but advertising works online because enough people click on the ads where it generates enough revenue where some people don't have to. And in the same way, that's what my vision for pay what you want is that it creates an ecosystem where it's like a sliding scale, fee system, right? Where some people are kicking in and a lot of people aren't, but everybody has access to to incredible privacy.
If I can throw some controversy, which is what I'm sure you guys will want. I think our conclusion is there's no money to be made from direct consumer. People don't want to pay for stuff if they can get it for free. And two, they're certainly unwilling to pay real money for protecting their privacy. And as a matter of fact, you can very easily quantify what it costs to buy people's privacy. Offer them a $5 coupon and you'll see what you get. Who has a Safeway card in this room? Who has a CVS card? What you do when you have a Safeway card is you're basically telling Safeway what the person that has this card,
You know what I do with
every
my
time.
Safeway card is that when I'm in the checkout line, I sometimes trade it with the person standing behind me.
To confuse the system.
Misinformation. Yeah.
But I think that's...
Once you do that about 10 or 20 times,
then the
it's-
system is worthless, I agree. but I think that's the boundary that we all struggle with is, to a certain extent, you have to help people despite themselves. And I think if we want to solve this issue, I think there's a lot more to be done in terms of educating people. And there's certainly a lot to be done in terms of changing the Patriot Act. I'm not sure that getting people to buy for higher level of privacy is going to work because people are unwilling to pay for that. And I was on the board of a company that was having a tool that protected children and teenagers online from being bullied, from having sex pictures of them being published and all that. That business crashed. And as we tried to salvage the company, we talked to the two competitors, and they told us that they wouldn't buy our company, and as a matter of fact, they would shut down as well. So that sort of proved to me, and you're talking about children online and all that, there was just no willingness to pay, or even to use when the system was free.
To some extent, one of the companies I helped start was Lookout. We just announced $55 million in funding this week,
Sure.
valuing the company at almost $1 billion, according to the New York Times, and that's all consumers paying a lot of money for security and privacy. So there are a lot of successful companies out there that do that. But with Wickr, we really do think about ourselves as free international calling and texting, trying to take the carrier market. That's why people pay for us. But why people stay is because we don't abuse their contact book, spam their friends, or sell their personal information. I think that's the customer loyalty part is how you get people to stay, by just treating them well.
Jack,
Can I suggest about that, just to build on that concept? Basically, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience in the first place. And at the end of the day, why do you use a Visa card? Because of the convenience, right? Because of the functionality associated with that, because of the benefit associated with that. And the reason why you do that is because of the trust associated with it and the associated product attributes of it. Let's face it, there's this thing called the zero liability rule in the United States. What does that mean? You lose your card, you get stolen, are you liable for any of the charges? No, you're not. That's a convenience feature of a card that makes it basically better than cash to a certain extent, right? And at the end of the day, to put this in perspective around what you need to do as companies, basically the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, about 25, 30 years ago, developed something that was called the FIPS, the Fair Information Practices Principles. It said that if you're going to be collecting personal information from consumers, you need to provide them notice, consent, give them the opportunity to view and modify the information about them. You have to be able to secure it, and you got to destroy it when you don't need it. And basically, that is the basis of all law that exists in this field today, whether it be in the United States as instantiated in the GLBA, which protects financial information, or HIPAA, which protects health information, or actually the European Union fundamental rights version of these principles as well. So my challenge to you as entrepreneurs is that if you're going to be collecting personal information, if you're going to be using it to provide value-added services, number one, focus on providing real value to the consumer. And number two, make certain that you protect the information as best you possibly can with the balance and with that in mind. You do that up front, and if you do that up front, it's going to make your life and your life cycle much more efficient as you actually grow and prosper.
Isn't it true that Visa does sell a lot of the user data that it collects?
Sell? No, actually,
No?
that's not true.
That is not true.
Well, so we don't actually sell data. That's actually not our business. There are other companies out there. Let's see now. There's Catalina, which does loyalty marketing cards, and there's also Axiom, and there are other companies which are data brokers. Now, how many of you are familiar with the data broker business? Okay, so the data broker business, it is a burgeoning area. It is one that is ripe for focus and investment right now. And basically, it's one that predates the internet, predates everything. It goes back to direct marketing, right? So you ever remember the Publishers Clearinghouse? You get that thing in the mail and you subscribe to magazines. My God, you know what? When you take those little stamps and you put them onto that little thing and you subscribe to these magazines, what are you actually doing? You're telling them what you're interested in. And what do? They sell that information, they gather that information, aggregate it, they have a profile about you, and they do it. You know, back in the old days, there used to be this magazine called, it's like, was it Bassmasters or like Bass Fishing, Fishing Daily, whatever. You know, interesting enough, you think about magazines with high volume and per page ads. It turns out that bass fishing magazines actually used to carry the highest per page ad revenue of all magazines. You know why? Because only bass fishermen read it, so they knew exactly what their audience was, right? The thing that has changed today is that they've come up with substitutes. Let's call that cookies. Let's call that signing up for these different things. And now, with things like Facebook and otherwise, they don't even have to guess anymore because you're volunteering all the information to them, right? And that's where the value is. But the fact of the matter is that even before Facebook, there were these companies like Axiom that had offline databases. They've married them with online databases. And basically what they've done is they've collected swaths of publicly available information. Now, not everybody's like Nico. Not everybody hides their homes, right? But if you go on to a number of different sites and you go to the public records office, you can find exactly where you live, what your addresses are, and things like that. All that information has been compiled, and companies like Axiom will go for a fee, assist to basically provide advertisers with that information to provide you with information. Sometimes that's based on an opt-in. Sometimes that's not based on an opt-in. Right? So the FTC is actually right now in the middle of an inquiry of the data broker industry because they're concerned about the level of transparency that these data brokers actually provide. Now, I call out Axiom, but Axiom is actually at the forefront of trying to provide transparency to the consumers. You can do some web searches today, and they actually have some tools that will allow you to see the profile that they've developed about you, and you can give you the opportunity to either opt out of it or even correct it. Now,
Jack, I'm gonna.
go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna jump in. One of the, I think one of the questions that this raises of whether or not Axiom is advocating for better user controls over their data or not, our companies like Axiom are gathering data that we don't actually have control over. At least with Google or Facebook or any of these other services, you're at least getting something out of it. It sounds to me like we're looking at a situation that can only be dealt with by regulation.
That's actually an excellent question. And basically, industry self-regulation is certainly one avenue that the data brokers are trying to do. But also, on the forefront as well, that's why the FTC is looking at these types of companies in the first place, because they do want to try to actually implement some controls around this, because the information is out there, right? In Europe, you actually have a comprehensive data protection law that prohibits or restricts your ability to collect these types of large databases of information without consent. In the United States, the FTC uses its unfair practices and deceptive acts power to try to enforce these same types of things. So regulation is something, right? Well, let's put it this way: the Axioms of the world kind of see the regulation coming, and it's going to happen.
Interesting. I'm going to start reading some of the audience questions that have been texted to me. Let's start off. Some of these we've already addressed. One of the most interesting questions, I think this is the most interesting question I've gotten so far, and it's something that we've all been thinking about, is the NSA has infiltrated standards bodies in order to weaken crypto and ensure that they can get in. The questioner asks, how can this be prevented in the future? I think it's really even a broader question than that. What's the value of investing in crypto if the NSA has a backdoor? Not necessarily just because the NSA has a backdoor, although that's scary enough, but as Nico pointed out in her presentation, if the NSA has a backdoor, there's going to be a hacker out there who's going to be able to get access to it. Water seeks its level in cases like this. So, Jacques, maybe you can start?
Yeah, I think, there's a legal question here whether the NSA should or could use, their backdoor and whether the Patriot Act is going way too far for what it was supposed to achieve. And my opinion is clear from the way I'm formulating it. But I think this issue of crypto is a bit of a fluke, because at one point or another, the data exists unencrypted. Data cannot be worked on in its encrypted form, therefore it's decrypted at some point. The minute you give a government the ability to say, whatever you have, I can have too, that means if it's unencrypted at any point in the process, they can get their hands on it. And so I actually think it's a huge deal that crypto has been broken, and I wish it wasn't. But I think in the grand scheme of things, that's just a fig leaf.
I'd like to speak to that.
Please.
I think that when I look at the NIST documents, the vast majority of them are very good documents. I've read a lot of them. I've used a lot of them in my projects. And I haven't found any more than just one example. There was a random number generator. NIST published, I guess there were 3 random number generators in one of their documents. And 2 of them were very good. One was based on a block cipher, another was based on a hash function, but the third one was based on a number theoretic algorithm based on elliptic curves. And it was just a terrible, just awful random bit generator. And any competent cryptographer would immediately recognize that it was just stupid and not use it. And I think that's where they exerted their influence. The other thing was the NIST elliptic curves, which I think are okay because the government uses them for secret and top secret data protection. So we use it, and however, we're thinking of we're going to start using other elliptic curves that were not designed by NIST as a protest, just to show our displeasure at the NSA's influence on NIST standards, even though it was only a little bit. I mean, we've only identified one thing. The egregious example was the the random bit generator. It's hardly ever used in industry. There was one notable example of it being used. There was a company that used it as its default random number generator for a crypto library. But you know, we don't. I think we should learn from this experience, and there should be such a severe reaction against this that we should never let it happen again. I think if we shame NIST for letting that happen, then maybe we could get them to not allow it to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience. What are some of the biggest opportunities currently available in privacy? If everybody in the audience who wanted to start a startup based in privacy, what should they go home tonight and work on? Where are the opportunities the most at the moment?
Well, don't work on secure VoIP because I'm working on that.
Actually, I have a great idea that I wish somebody would do. I don't have time to do a startup, but what's wrong with the current system is that we are not Google's users, we're Google's product. And Google makes money by selling our information or by giving people access to our information. If somebody is going to make $5 or $10 by getting me to buy this car rather than this car,
Yeah, let's just give them the money.
I want a piece of that $5 to $10. I want to tell you, I want to go to a website where I say, I'm in the market for a car. I want it to be like that. It's one of those. Go ahead, come and target me, but I want a piece of it. That's what I think is an interesting idea. And that will hollow out people that make money by trying to sell data, because I'll give them much more accurate data.
So
I go in the opposite direction. I would say, no, don't. Just don't collect that data and let me pay you to do my searches, and don't save the search information.
But you can do that by just emptying your cookie and browsing incognito.
You know, your mom is never going to do that.
Go back to education. You know, I could tell my mom to not do that.
You know, what about my mom? You know, what about
But I think the person that would pay money to search without being targeted would also know to browse incognito and without cookies turned on.
That's a heavy burden. I think I would rather just pay look, we pay for cable TV, we pay for our phones. Why can't we just, you know, when it rains, we say, oops, didn't pay the weather bill, you know? Can't we just pay the search bill?
Sure.
You know, just, it's like electricity.
But don't we do that? I mean, isn't the exchange of data what we're paying? Google wants you to use Google Search because they give you.
No, but I'm saying pay it in cash instead of giving up data. It just have Google's engineers react by having a special class of service. Sure. You pay them a couple of bucks a month or whatever it is, sure. and for that you get search.
Paid Gmail, basically.
You can do your searches, and they give you search results, and they don't keep the data.
Sure.
And they get their money from you, and in exchange from, then you're a customer.
Isn't Yahoo
you're not the
doing
product.
that now? Yes. Yahoo just announced that their revamped Yahoo Mail paid version will not show you any ads.
They didn't say don't collect data.
Well, exactly. They didn't say that they don't collect any data. And
I want more than simply not showing me ads.
Yeah.
I want them to absolutely positively not collect the data, because once they collect the data, it's an attractive nuisance. Sure. It's subpoena bait. It is, you know, it can be hacked into by, you know, organized crime, by the Chinese, by governments everywhere.
More importantly, investors will make you make money off of it.
So
if you're holding it.
So
that's right.
It sounds like the holy grail then is private Gmail. What we want is some kind of extremely well-developed, constantly engineered email client, webmail client that.
You're just proving the point, right? There is private email
that we can pay for.
It exists. It's $5 to $10 a month. You can get it from a whole bunch of hosting providers and use, you know, in email reader.
But as it stands right now, when you have your mail, stored in a hosting service, it's subject to the government coming in and asking for it. When I published PGP in 1991, I was keeping my mail at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. And I had all my mail there, and I mean, later on, US Customs came and asked for that mail. And if they'd gotten their hands on it, I probably would have gone to prison. But what happened is that the people at NCAR, who I did not speak to at all about this, they read the newspaper, and they knew about my case. And so they decided unilaterally just to take it upon themselves to change their backup policy, to not keep backups for more than 1 year. And so they just erased all backups older than 1 year across the board, across their entire user population at NCAR. And well, that included me. And so right after they did that, Customs came in and asked for my old email dating from that period, and they said,
There was nothing there.
we don't have it.
Right.
And
But as an individual, I can tell you that it's incredibly useful that I can type in one word sometimes into my Gmail and pull up an email from 2004. I mean, it's fascinating that I have this personal history, and I think, I think the idea of a private email system is something that appeals to people. People would pay for that, but Google won't offer it. What they are doing, though, is they're investing in, perfect forward secrecy and other web encryption techniques.
well, that protects it while it's in motion. But
Right.
once it's on their servers,
Right.
it's still subpoena bait.
Right. So last question from the audience, and it's a corker. How can any of us as individuals, as consumers, trust any company?
I think a lot of it comes down to your business model. That's what I would say as a follow the
Yeah.
money. You know, how is a company making
Yeah.
money? You know, I mean, you look at our privacy policy, for example. We don't want any of your personal information. You know, the only
Yeah.
time we're going to get it is if you email it to us. We don't make any money off it. We don't want it.
Our business model is part of our security model. And also, I mean, you can also do something with the protocols. The protocol I use for secure VoIP, ZRTP, I designed it many years ago with the idea of I don't trust the phone company. And the irony now is that, now I'm the service provider, but we're using a protocol that was designed so you don't have to trust the service provider. We don't keep the keys. We can't, we never get the keys. The protocol doesn't allow us to. And that goes for the text messaging too. So, and plus we publish our source code. That's an important thing. You want to see if the client software actually doesn't send the keys anywhere except the other party. It doesn't negotiate the keys except with the other party. And so publish source code, do a crypto architecture that doesn't share keys with the server, and have a business model that doesn't keep logs and doesn't collect customer data. And if you do all those things, then maybe people will trust you. It also helps to have a good reputation.
Nico?
I think it's follow the money. Now, that's why I boycott Facebook. I say, look at it. It wasn't made for your benefit. It's made for advertisers.
Amen.
Jack?
All I can tell you is the basic sense we are a business that actually deals with data, that it is really about trust. It's about providing high consumer value and making sure that you respect the consumer ultimately, and that you're good to your word, that you follow the fair information practices principles, and that you really own it. Now, these guys are examples of extreme ownership. There's no doubt about that. But I know there are a lot of you out there that want to actually create that next social experience for people. You have to make certain, number one, respect the consumer, respect their data. Okay?
I agree. I think it's follow the money. If Visa makes, 3% or 4%?
We don't make that, but somebody does, yeah.
From a transaction for the convenience, then you know that somebody's paying for that, and therefore they have every reason to protect your data. If nobody is seemingly making money and yet the service exists and the company lives on, somebody is using your data to make money somehow. And so nothing is ever free. So if it looks like it's free, it probably isn't.
All right, guys. I want to thank the panelists very much for sticking through this and answering everyone's questions. Thank you to everybody who's here.